the discussion is going beyond op-ed pages, and social media is also a leveler where people are able to counter some of this. But this has been the classic dichotomy of the two streams, the two major streams at least of the Nehruvian stream, the Savarkarite stream of the struggle, and thereafter and for the longest time we know that whether it was Savarkar, whether it was people like him, whether it was anyone who went against the dominant grain of the time, the political grain of the time was suppressed and rather ruthlessly and demonized. Cases, like in the case of Savarkar, with the whole fixing of the Gandhi assassination case to him, so that that blemish, that taint remains with him all through, and then he's demonized all his life, and whatever he may have achieved in his life can then be discredited as in the way that it is currently. And this is rather unfortunate, and it's also vicious at the same time, where, as Kanchanda mentioned, to promote one particular stream or dynasty, that you do it at the expense of several others, and actually subjugate all other voices as being non-contributive at all. Now, this whole talk
Dr. Sampath, if I may
that
interject, if
quit
you can
India.
just
Sorry.
historically explain to us that what explains that visceral response when it comes to Savarkar.
Well, right from the beginning, Savarkar was somebody who, from when they were young men, Gandhi and Savarkar were opposite poles of the spectrum, and both, see, I would say, all of them had the same goal in mind of wanting freedom for India, but the paths that they chose to get there were different, and these two men couldn't have been more different than the other. Gandhi believing in absolute non-violence, whereas Savarkar believing in the violent armed rebellion and the revolutionary movement. And so they had these tiffs right from the early decades of the 20th century. And these differences only accentuated with time, particularly on several other issues also that got intertwined. One was the whole appeasement of the Muslims that Gandhi and the Congress started with the Khilafat movement, and the kind of dangerous seeds of partition that got sown right from then on. This whole separate electorates and this whole separatism that was given a premium. Uh, and then, of course, within the Hindu fold, the oppressed classes, their status, how does one see that? The communal award of the 1930s, all of this, in these matters, these two men particularly were at loggerheads with each other on every issue. And Savarkar particularly kept a very close watch of whatever Gandhi was saying and writing in his public life, in his journals, and so on, and countering it as an ideological and intellectual counter to that in his own newspaper, the Shraddhanand. And so the two men were constantly opponents of each other. And in 1937, when Savarkar came out of conditional confinement in Ratnagiri, it was assumed that he's going to join the Congress. In fact, the then Congress president Subhash Chandra Bose had written letters to him, and Nehru too had written letters. That here was a man who was away from political life for 27 long years of imprisonment and house arrest, and now he's going to join the Congress. But Savarkar famously had said that I'd rather be in the last line of the patriots than in the first line of the traitors. And he thought the Congress had gone so far ahead in its policy of Muslim appeasement, which would lead to a vivisection of the country. And so he was in no way going to associate with that party. So ever since that happened, I think the hatred just got multiplied so much for him. I'm right from 1937, when he took over the Hindu Mahasabha as a to make it a electorally fighting fit body for against the Congress and the Muslim League. there were several attempts made to even have him killed, other than of course black flag protests, etc., wherever he went by congressmen. There were also attempts to stone him, have him killed. A couple of times he narrowly missed getting murdered. So this hatred, I think, stemmed from then on, that how could somebody who we thought would be part of us has gone away as a competitive force. And this only started getting more when he got more active in politics. And this whole talk, of the Quit India movement, and that he did not participate, the Hindu Mahasabha did not participate. There was a huge amount of opposition to the Quit India movement within the Congress itself, including the president of the Congress, Maulana Azad, who had thought that this was the most foolhardy kind of an attempt at a time when Japan was at our borders, and to launch a movement like this was disastrous for the nation, with zero planning, even by Gandhi's own standards of earlier movements. This was just done at a whim. After the failure of the Crips mission, Gandhi was getting increasingly sidelined within the Congress. So to reinvent his own control over the party, this whole thing came about. And so several people, including Rajgopalachari, who was, Gandhi's trusted aide, had said that, what sort of a, foolhardy movement is this, especially when Gandhi said the British should go, but they should leave their army behind, which would have made this whole subcontinent into a vast battlefield for the Western powers, and got us embroiled into a catastrophic situation. So even Rajaji was opposed to it. Ambedkar, curiously, who was right there in the Viceroy's Council at that time, had urged all the people of India not to participate in the Quit India movement, and it would be a treachery to the nation, according to him, to do this at such a time. And this whole movement was crushed within a couple of months, 2-3 months. Within a week of its announcement, the entire Congress top leadership was put in either jail or Aga Khan Palace and other places. And within a couple of months, there was the movement itself was quite ruthlessly crushed. And it was then left to the underground movement, the revolutionaries, the army, people, and also common people who just came out, and this do or die call that was given, it had no clear planning or meaning as to what it meant. So do or die, does do also mean violence? As the Quit India movement ended up as a very, very violent movement. So somebody who had taken the movement back in 1921 when Chauri Chaura happened, 1942 was infinitely, in comparison, much more violent than what it was in Chauri Chaura, the isolated case. So, in fact, the Congress disowned itself from the Quit India movement and said this was not something that we had been advocating. In fact, Nehru was very apologetic, saying several decades of talking about non-violence has not gone into the heads of the people of this country. So it was always called as August disturbances and not the Quit India movement. And in fact, after coming out of Aga Khan Palace in 1944, Gandhi gave an undertaking to the British that I will no longer embarrass the British government, and we will no more launches of civil disobedience will be done. We will aid the war effort, and so on. So, in such a case, when a reassessment of the movement and what its progenitors thought of it. Of course, the movement was very effective. I'm not, undermining the movement only because it came out of the hands of the Congress leadership, and the common people, the revolutionaries, the underground elements, they took over, and that's how you saw picketing, you saw railway lines being cut, telegraph lines cut, violence everywhere, and at the same time, the INA gaining traction on the eastern frontiers, Japan entering the scene. So all of that contributing at that time to a catapulting effect. And therefore, when we look at that in that context, say, Savarkar abstaining from the Quit India movement seems like a very logical thing to do, just like several other Sena voices within the Congress itself had advised Gandhi not to launch this movement, whether it was, as I said, Maulana Azad or Rajaji and others. And Ambedkar having said that today, none of us dare to say that Ambedkar was a stooge of the British, or call him the kind of names that they very generously do for Savarkar. So I think that is the tragedy, Kartikeya, where we've not had a dispassionate assessment of this very vital period, which as I said earlier, is very foundational to the very the birth of this new nation. What were the reasons why it came? Who were the people who were instrumental, and who were the people who later, once the project was completed, who took over the reins of power and the fruits of freedom. So I think the retelling, so to say, of that story, there's a dire need for that to do this. Without getting into, and I completely agree with Kanchan that the state should not enter into this project of patronizing this writing, because that will be another hash of a job, like in the past. And so I think it should be left to